Greetings, conservatives. This is your humble host, John Moraga, and we are back with more ConservaCast. We look forward to keeping you informed with the latest and most relevant commentary of conservative issues. So without further ado, here are a few topics I'd like to discuss. To begin, I'd like to mention that Conservatives Corner has recently celebrated our 1-year anniversary. It's been a crazy ride, and we anticipate the ride will continue to be fun. We have grown our following and support. We have been active on social media, but Facebook in particular has been a whirlwind, hasn't it? Mark Zuckerberg has even gone before Congress to testify about some questionable privacy issues. And, as you may know if you have dealt with conservative social media, it's been difficult to get our message out. In fact, some of the posts that we've put up on Facebook have been restricted, and even some of the paid posts that we've tried to boost have not gotten quite the reach that we anticipated. So, needless to say, it's been quite challenging to actually get our reach and our message out to the maximum number of people. It's not unfamiliar to those who are conservatives on Facebook, but we have been censored and restricted. Next, Trump has moved our U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Now, if you know me personally, or if you followed me on social media or read any of my articles, you'll know that I am not the biggest Trump supporter. In fact, I've been quite critical of him, pre-election and during his presidency. However, even I have to recognize that this is probably one of the best things that he's done since he's been in office. Now, I personally believe that this is the result of a lot of pressure from people close to him. He is somebody who I think likes to be liked, somebody who has a bit of an ego, and so by trying to please those who are closest to him, he may feel this is a way to do that. And again, as a result of pressure, he has escalated the date to when he was going to move it. Some of you may recall that back, I believe it was December of last year, 2017, he officially recognized the capital of Israel as Jerusalem, as did his predecessors before, but what his predecessors didn't do is actually move the embassy. Now, he himself had actually anticipated moving it several years out, but again, because I believe, because of pressure as a result of some of the influence of some of the people closest to him, he escalated that date and moved it just a few weeks ago. Now, stipulated, the embassy that he moved is not the full-fledged building and embassy that it will be, but it's far more than what any of his predecessors has done for the past few decades. So again, even though I am quite critical of a lot of moves that he has done, this is objectively a move toward the right direction in a good way. The next topic is California's governor's race. Democrat Gavin Newsom and Republican John Cox were the top two candidates who won last night's gubernatorial primary election. Now, California is a notorious bastion of liberalism, so it was going to be a tough fight for any Republican to succeed, but especially a Republican with little name recognition like John Cox. I don't know much about him, so I don't know how conservative he actually is, but he's going to have an uphill battle just by running as a Republican. President Trump has endorsed him, which may have helped him succeed in the primary, but it's hard to know if that endorsement will help or be a liability during the general election. Something else I took away from last night is that Antonio Villaraigosa is just as disliked in politics as it was projected. Being from California, I personally remember how embarrassing Villaraigosa was, even among his fellow Democrats. As a failed former mayor of Los Angeles, his bid to run for governor was laughable, and it proved to be even more comical when the results came in. He barely got a double-digit percentage of the vote, and John Cox, the Republican, got more than double those votes. We can only hope Villaraigosa decides to leave public life and politics, but that may just be too much to ask. The next topic I'd like to discuss is a theological contemplation. Now, as we started to resume our production of these ConservaCasts, it has been quite challenging to focus on secular commentary, because I keep going back to the idea of God's providence involved in all of the chaos, if you will, that we've been witnessing and that's been on the news lately. It's been quite difficult to not default back on any type of supernatural or theological influence. Now, obviously, everybody has the ability to choose their own paths in life with some restrictions. But ultimately, because there are things happening on such a grand scale, I find myself wanting to give some exegesis, if you will, and turn to some scriptures to kind of find some answers. Now, I have pretty much ruled that out as far as these ConservaCasts, because I don't want to turn this into some religious commentary and seminary of sorts. So I've decided to possibly start a parallel podcast or other type of production that may focus more on those theological ideas. But for the time being, we are still pursuing the secular commentary and political analysis of the day-to-day or frequent news stories and topics. Now, this indirectly ties into the last topic I'd like to discuss, which is conservatism promoting self-accountability. That is, I believe we all have free will, and we all have the ability to make certain decisions in our lives. Now, granted, that's with some restrictions and some parameters that are outside of our control. But for the most part, we have the ability to set things into motion by our own free will and choices. That's one of the primary things that separates us from liberals and the idea of socialism or communal governance, so to speak. We don't point to other people or blame others necessarily for our good or bad. So I'd really like to emphasize that value or that conservative tenet that we should be following. I'll be speaking more about that in future podcasts, but I just wanted to briefly touch on that concept and how if we as conservatives understood that and applied that more often, we might actually start to see a different outcome in our world. In other words, if we started to examine our own lives and take accountability for the bad choices that we've been making, rather than looking at the news, rather than looking at social commentary or political moves that have gone on in our state or in DC or local government even, we might have more of an influence. And if we as conservatives can encourage others who may not be conservatives to take on that worldview or mentality, that could have an even greater influence, a domino effect, so to speak. But again, I'll be talking more on that later. But I'd just like to leave you with that idea that we as conservatives should really focus in on that value of personal accountability. Well, that's going to do it for this podcast, folks. Some of the things to look forward to: we are still working on producing the series of our conservative pillars, which are biblical precedent, natural law, and federalism. We know we've been promising this series for a while, but we want to take our time and provide you the best production of it. We believe these are the foundations of conservatism, and as such, we want to thoroughly go through things and point things out and reference you to certain ideas and people. Thanks for joining us once again, and we hope you will invite your friends and family to join us in our efforts to champion conservatism for generations to come.
But it wouldn't be nothing, not a woman